Most of us spend our lives being pulled around by our minds. A thought arrives, and we follow it. A feeling tightens, and suddenly we are inside it. A memory appears, and for a moment the past feels more real than the room we are sitting in. But there is another possibility. There is a way of experiencing all of this without being caught by it. A kind of inner freedom that is quieter, simpler, and much closer than we imagine. And the strange thing is, you do not need to create it. It is already here. You may simply have never noticed where to look. Before we begin, feel free to share what time it is and where you're listening from. In the Buddhist tradition, this inner freedom is described as the mind of non-clinging, the mind of freedom, and it is not something you need to build or earn. It is already here, closer than your breath, working underneath every moment of your life. The only trouble is that we tend to overlook it, the same way we overlook the space in a room while our eyes go to the objects inside it. There is nothing to achieve tonight, nothing to figure out. The mind of freedom does not ask for effort. It only asks to be noticed. And it turns out we have all noticed it before, in small, overlooked moments we rarely gave ourselves credit for. So, settle in. Let whatever brought you here be enough. Let the body find a position it can trust, and let the breath do whatever it is already doing. Thank you for joining us here at Midnight Monk. Let us begin. There is an old teaching where the Buddha speaks to his followers about what the whole of spiritual life is actually for. He says, in essence, the purpose of the spiritual life is not to gain status, recognition, virtue, deep concentration, or even insight. Its true goal is an unshakable freedom of the heart. Everything comes down to a heart that can let go of whatever it is holding and receive the world openly, without gripping. That is the whole direction of the path. And one of the first places we can feel the difference between gripping and receiving is in how we take in the world, how we listen, how we look, because there is a way of paying attention that actually prevents the very experience it is reaching for. The hands close around the moment, and the moment goes still inside them. And there is another way, where the hands stay open, and the whole living thing comes in. In the days of the Tang dynasty, there lived a scholar named Deshan. From his youth he had devoted himself to the study of one text above all others, the Diamond Sutra, one of the great wisdom teachings of Buddhism. He read it, memorized it, lectured on it, and over many years he wrote his own commentaries, page after page of careful notes, explaining every line. His learning became famous throughout the northern provinces. People traveled long distances to hear him speak, and he answered every question with a passage, a reference, an explanation. There was no corner of the text he had not mapped. Then word reached him of teachers in the south who claimed something that offended everything he had built. These Chan masters, it was said, taught that the deepest truth could not be found in texts at all. They spoke of pointing directly at the mind, of an awakening that needed no commentary. Deshan was troubled by this, and then he was determined. He would travel south himself, meet these teachers, and correct them. He packed his commentaries, the work of his whole life, into a great basket, loaded it onto his back, and set out on the long road. He walked for many days, and one afternoon, tired and hungry, he came to a small roadside stall where an old woman sold tea and rice cakes. He set down his basket with relief and asked to buy some refreshments. The old woman looked at the basket. "That is a heavy load, venerable scholar, she said. What are you carrying? My commentaries on the Diamond Sutra, Deshan said, and there was pride in his voice. The work of many years. The old woman nodded slowly. I am only a seller of rice cakes, she said, but I have heard that this sutra contains a certain line. It says the past mind cannot be grasped, the present mind cannot be grasped, and the future mind cannot be grasped. She looked up at him. You wish to refresh your mind with my rice cakes. Tell me, learned one, which mind do you intend to refresh? The past mind, the present mind, or the future mind? Deshan opened his mouth to answer. Nothing came. He knew the line she had quoted. He had written pages about it. He could have recited every classical interpretation of it from memory. But her question was not asking for an interpretation. It was pointing at something alive, something happening right there at the roadside stall in the afternoon light, and all his years of study had given him nothing to meet it with. He stood in silence, a famous scholar, with a basket of explanations on the ground beside him, unable to say a single word. At last, humbled, he asked her, Is there a teacher near here? Master Longtan, she said. About 5 miles on. Deshan walked those 5 miles as a different man than the one who had set out from the north. He arrived at Longtan's small temple and stayed, asking questions late into the evenings, listening now instead of lecturing. One night he sat with the master for many hours, question after question, until Longtan finally said, The night is growing old. Why don't you retire? Deshan bowed and lifted the screen to leave. Then he paused. It is very dark outside, he said. Longtan lit a candle and held it out to him. And in the moment Deshan reached out and took it, Longtan leaned forward and blew it out. Complete darkness. And in that darkness, something in Deshan opened. All at once, without a single word of explanation, he saw what all the commentaries had been circling around for decades and never touched. He stood in the dark doorway, and he understood, and the understanding did not come through the mind that grasps. It came through the one that receives. The next day, in the courtyard, Deshan lifted the great basket one last time, the whole work of his life, and set it down by the temple gate. He was leaving it behind. There was no anger in it and no drama. Resting his hand on the pages he had carried across half the country, he said, However deep our learning, compared with this, it is like a single hair laid against the great sky. However complete our knowledge, it is like one drop of water beside the ocean. And then he bowed to the basket and walked on without it, lighter than he had been in 30 years. This story is not against study. The Diamond Sutra was never the problem, and neither was Deshan's love of it. The problem was what happened between him and the teaching over all those years. Slowly, without him noticing, the teaching had become a thing he owned. Something to master, something to defend, something to carry on his back like cargo. He had taken a living truth and cut it into pieces, and he knew every piece by heart. But somewhere in all that cutting and sorting, the living part had slipped away. The old woman showed him this with one simple question. She did not argue with him. She just asked him to bring all that knowledge to the ordinary moment in front of him. A tired man, a plate of rice cakes, an afternoon on the road. And the knowledge could not do it. It was made for explaining, and this moment did not need explaining. It needed meeting. Most of us do a small version of this every day. We listen to music and spend the whole song deciding whether we like it. We watch something beautiful and immediately start comparing it to something else. We sit with a person we love while quietly building our case about them or planning what to say next. In each case, the mind is busy handling the experience instead of having it. The pieces are all there. The whole is missing. The Zen teacher Shunryu Suzuki put it in one line: in the beginner's mind there are many possibilities, but in the expert's mind there are few. Deshan arrived at that tea stall as the expert, and the expert's mind was full. There was no room in it for anything to enter. The old woman's question, and later the darkness when the candle went out, emptied his hands. And the moment his hands were empty, the truth he had chased through 10,000 pages was simply there, whole, free of charge. That is what the Buddha meant by the sure heart's release. The path points toward a letting go, and when the letting go happens, what we were reaching for turns out to be already here. There is another story, older still, told of a king in ancient China who sent his young son, Prince Te, to study under a master named Pan Ku. The prince was to inherit the throne one day, and his father wanted him taught the things that mattered most. So the boy traveled to the master's mountain temple, expecting lessons in strategy, in law, in the arts of governing. Instead, on the first morning, Pan Ku sent him away. "Go alone into the forest," the master said. "Stay there for 1 year. When the year has passed, return and describe to me the sound of the forest." The prince was puzzled, but he obeyed. He built a small shelter among the trees and settled into the strange, slow life of listening. Through the spring he listened, and through the wet warmth of summer, through the dry rattle of autumn and the long hush of winter. He made it his task to notice everything. He learned to tell the songs of different birds apart. He learned the sound of wind in pine and the different sound of wind in bamboo. He noted the creak of branches, the tapping of rain working down through layers of leaves, the hum of insects rising at dusk and falling silent at dawn. When the year had passed, he returned to the temple, knelt before his master, and delivered his report with the thoroughness of a good student. "Master, I could hear the cuckoos singing and the leaves rustling. I could hear the hummingbirds, the crickets, the grasses moving, the bees, and the wind as it whispered and as it shouted. I heard the stream in flood and the stream in drought. I heard everything the forest contains." Pan Ku listened to the whole inventory without expression. When the prince finished, the master said only this: "Go back to the forest and listen to what more you can hear." The prince was bewildered. What more could there be? He had spent a year gathering every sound the forest made. He had missed nothing. But he bowed and returned to the trees. Day after day he sat and listened, straining for something new, and heard only what he had already catalogued. The birds were the same birds. The wind was the same wind. Days became weeks. His frustration rose and then, slowly, having nothing left to feed on, it wore itself out. There was nothing to find, and so, gradually, he stopped hunting. He simply sat, morning after morning, with nothing to collect and no report to prepare. The listening went on, but the reaching in it had died away. And then one morning, as he sat beneath the trees in the first light, he began to hear sounds he had never heard before. They were faint, at the very edge of hearing, and at first he did not trust them. But the more still he became, the clearer they grew. He returned to the temple and knelt before Pan Ku, and this time his voice was different. "Master," he said, "when I listened most closely, I could hear the unheard. The sound of flowers opening, the sound of the sun warming the earth, the sound of the grass drinking the morning dew. The master nodded, and for the first time he looked satisfied. To hear the unheard, Panku said, is the discipline you will need above all others. Only one who has learned to listen this closely to the world can listen closely to people. A ruler who hears only the words spoken to him hears almost nothing. But one who can hear what is not said, the feelings not expressed, the troubles not spoken aloud, that one can truly care for those in his charge. The prince's first year was not wasted. He learned real things, and everything in his report was true. But look at what changed between the first report and the second. The forest was the same forest. His ears were the same ears. The only thing that fell away was the collecting. In that first year, every sound was grabbed the moment it arrived. Named, sorted, saved up for the report. His listening had a closed fist inside it, and a fist can catch one thing at a time, but it cannot receive a whole forest. When the searching finally wore itself out, when there was nothing left to hunt for and nothing to prove, the fist opened on its own, and through that open hand came what had been there all along, too soft for a grabbing ear to catch. This is the same lesson Deshan learned at the tea stall, arriving from the other direction. Both of them worked hard. Both of them gathered everything that could be gathered. And for both of them, the real thing arrived only after the gathering stopped. In Buddhism, this is the difference between grasping at life and being present for it. The Buddha taught that clinging is the root of our unease, and this is one of its quietest forms. Clinging to experience itself, trying to capture it, instead of letting it in. The teacher, Thich Nhat Hanh, said, "The most precious gift we can offer anyone is our attention." That is what Panku was training the prince to give, and it is why the master's final words turned toward people. A ruler who hears only the words spoken to him hears almost nothing. Someone who can hear what is underneath the words, the tiredness in a voice, the worry a friend cannot quite say out loud, that person is listening the way the prince listened in his second year, with nothing in the hands. Most of us live in the first year of the prince's forest. So much of a day is spent gathering. We collect photographs and keepsakes, opinions and plans, things to tell someone about later. Even a holiday can turn into a harvest, every hour picked and stored as proof that it happened. None of this comes from bad intentions. Underneath it is a wish that is actually quite innocent, to hold on to what is good, to keep it, to make it ours. But the holding is exactly what thins it out. Experience is like the finer sounds of the forest. It gives itself fully only to the open hand. And there is one more kindness in this teaching. The grasping habit itself does not need to be fought. When the mind gets caught again, reaching, judging, collecting, that too can simply be allowed in, one more sound in the forest. Met without a struggle, it loosens by itself. The heart's release the Buddha spoke of is wide enough to hold even our failures to release. Somewhere in the next day or two, there may be a moment with something or someone you already know well. A meal you have eaten 100 times. A voice you have heard for years. A street you walk without thinking. Those familiar things are like the prince's forest in his second year, fully catalogued, nothing new to find. And that is exactly what makes them the perfect place to try open hands. For one breath or two, there is nothing to decide about them, nothing to compare them to, nothing to keep. Just the taste as it is, the voice as it is. Often, something surprising comes through, some small warmth or detail that was always there, waiting for a listener who had stopped collecting. Let things rest here for a little while. When it feels natural, the path continues, and we will take the next stretch of it together. The Zen teacher Shunryu Suzuki once said, "It is very important to believe in nothing." He did not mean cynicism or emptiness. He meant something closer to trust. Trust in what is already here, before belief adds a layer on top. And what is already here, what most of us have touched many times without realizing it, is the mind that does not cling. It may have shown up during ordinary moments that were quickly forgotten, and extraordinary ones that were remembered but misunderstood. It was never something far away, waiting at the end of a long practice. It was always the very thing standing in the room. This is a strange idea for a culture built on earning and achieving. If the mind of freedom is already here, why practice at all? And the Buddhist answer is simple: because we keep overlooking it. We keep giving our attention to the objects, the concerns, the next task on the list, and we walk right past the open space that holds them all. Practice is learning to notice what has been here all along. And the best evidence that it has been here all along is memory. Because every one of us has had moments, sometimes large, sometimes barely noticeable, where the grip released on its own and everything changed. Among the many accounts from astronauts who have traveled beyond the atmosphere, there is a pattern so consistent that it has been given a name: the overview effect. It happens when a person looks back at Earth from orbit and sees the planet whole, a blue and white sphere hanging in black space. Almost everyone who has seen this reports the same thing: a sudden, involuntary shift in perspective so deep that it changes how they think about life from that point on. One astronaut, a woman on her first mission aboard the space station, described the moment she first floated to the window and looked down. She had been briefed about the overview effect. She had seen the photographs. She thought she understood what was coming. But when she pressed her face to the glass and saw the Earth turn slowly below her, she realized the briefings had not prepared her at all. She could see storms forming and dissolving. She could see the soft line where daylight met darkness moving slowly across land and sea. And what struck her most was how thin the atmosphere looked, how delicate the bright ring of air, holding everything alive. "You see that it is a single place," she said later, trying to put it into words. "A shared home. And you recognize that you are a piece of this total life." She described a feeling of absolute sufficiency. There was nowhere else to be, nothing to accomplish. The sight itself was enough, and the person seeing it did not need to be anyone special in order to receive it. All the worries she had brought with her, the ones that had felt so pressing on the ground, seemed to still exist, but they had lost their grip. They were floating somewhere behind her, no longer attached. From far enough away, the concerns that fill a life visibly loosen, and what remains is tenderness. It does not take a spacecraft to reach this kind of release. That is the remarkable thing. The overview effect is dramatic because of the setting, but the inner shift it describes is something almost everyone has felt, in much smaller and more forgettable moments, right here on the ground. Think of a time spent walking in open country, or along a shoreline, or through a forest that stretches farther than the eye can see. After a few hours, or sometimes a few days, the concerns of ordinary life begin to fade. It is not that problems disappear, but they stop pressing so urgently against the chest. From the top of a ridge, looking down at the town where all those pressures live, a person might find herself wondering, how did those things hold me so tightly? They seem so small from here. And nothing about them changed while she was climbing. What changed was the holding. The distance loosened the grip, and with the grip loosened, everything could finally be seen at its true size. The Buddhist teaching here is not that mountains are holy and cities are profane. The teaching is that the loosened grip is available anywhere. It shows up in mountains because mountains strip away the conditions that feed clinging. But the clinging was optional all along. The mountain only proves it. And this is what the tradition means when it says that the mind of freedom is not something manufactured. It is something recognized. Practice does not build it. Practice clears away the noise long enough for us to realize it was already playing. Many people carry a picture of the spiritual path as a long climb toward a distant peak, with peace waiting at the top for the few who make it. That picture is heavy, and it quietly discourages almost everyone who holds it. But the actual teaching of the tradition points somewhere much closer. The Buddha did not describe awakening as arriving somewhere new. He described it as waking up to what is the case, and what has always been the case. The ease we glimpse on a mountaintop or in the astronaut's window is real evidence about our own nature. It says the settled mind is not a prize at the end of the road. It is what the mind does, all by itself, whenever the gripping stops. This is also why remembering these moments matters. Most people have a strange habit of dismissing their own experiences of peace. The calm after a long walk gets credited to the walk. The ease at the shoreline gets credited to the sea. The stillness of a certain evening gets credited to luck. The circumstances get all the credit, and the mind gets none. But the sea did not become peaceful. The mountain did not relax. Something in the person released, and the release was theirs. Learning to notice this, to say inwardly that ease was mine, my own mind resting in its natural state, builds a kind of steady confidence that no amount of striving can produce. In an old temple town, long ago, there lived a sandal maker. His shop was small, tucked into a narrow lane across from the house of a wealthy rice merchant, and his tools were few: a bench, a knife, a supply of leather, a last for shaping soles. He had no savings and no plans beyond the day's work. But from the moment the sun rose until the light faded, he sang. His voice was nothing remarkable by any trained standard. It simply came out of him, like steam rising from a pot. He sang as he cut the leather. He sang as he stitched the straps. He sang while he ate his midday rice, and he sang while sweeping the floor at dusk. And at night, he slept deeply and without interruption, the kind of sleep that comes when nothing is waiting on the other side. Across the lane, the rice merchant lived a different life. His storerooms were full, his ledgers complex, his reputation considerable. But he slept badly. Numbers chased each other through his dreams. He lay awake, calculating risks, anticipating losses, wondering which of his associates could be trusted. And every morning, just as his exhausted body finally began to drift toward rest, the sandal maker's singing started up again. One day, the merchant, who was not an unkind man but simply a puzzled one, called the sandal maker across the lane to his sitting room. He poured tea and asked a question. "Tell me honestly, what do you earn in a year?" The sandal maker laughed. "A year? I have never thought about it that way. I earn what the day brings. Some days more, some days less. It is enough." The merchant studied him for a long moment. Then he went to a shelf, brought down a lacquered box, and opened it. Inside were silver coins, more than the sandal maker would see in 10 years of work. "Take this," the merchant said. "Set it aside. Use it when the lean days come. You should not have to live so close to the edge." The sandal maker's eyes widened. He thanked the merchant warmly, carried the box home, and hid it beneath the floorboards under his sleeping mat. That night, he did not sing. He lay in the dark, aware of the box beneath the floor. The small sounds of the house, sounds he had never once thought about, now seemed to ask for his attention. He found himself listening to the lane outside. He rose once and then again to make sure the floorboards lay flat. Sleep came late and stayed thin, and when the sun rose, no song rose with it. A second night passed the same way, and a third. The sandal maker stood at his bench, but his hands felt stiff and his throat felt closed. He tried to sing, and the notes came out thin and forced. The joy that had lived in his chest like a bird on a branch had moved out, replaced by a watchfulness he had never known before. On the fourth morning, before the sun had fully risen, the sandal maker crossed the lane and knocked on the merchant's door. The merchant appeared in his robe, bleary from another sleepless night of his own. "Take back your silver," the sandal maker said, holding out the lacquered box. "Take it all, and give me back my song." The merchant blinked at him. Then something shifted in his face, a kind of recognition, as if he were hearing a truth about his own life told in someone else's voice. He took the box and watched the sandal maker walk back across the lane, step into his shop, sit down at his bench, and begin to sing. That night the sandal maker slept as he had always slept, deeply, easily, and without interruption. The merchant, across the lane, lay in the dark listening to the silence, and wondered what it would cost to buy that kind of rest. But rest like that was never for sale. The sandal maker had not found his peace by being poor, and the merchant had not lost his by being rich. What stood between the merchant and his sleep was never the silver itself. It was how tightly he held it. The sandal maker's days were already complete before the silver arrived. His life held everything it needed: work for the hands, a song rising on its own, sleep that came without bargaining. He did not know he was at peace, because peace, when it is native, does not announce itself. It simply lives in the body and the breath, like warmth in a stone that has sat all day in the sun. It is only when something disturbs it that we notice it was there. And this is the teaching about recognition. The mind of freedom does not arrive with trumpets. It arrives, and has already arrived, in the most overlooked moments of an ordinary day. A cup of something warm held between the hands after a long afternoon. The moment of sitting down at the end of a stretch of work, when nothing needs to happen next. The last few breaths before sleep, when there is no longer anyone to be and nothing to defend, and the body simply rests. In those moments, the grip is already loose. There is no effort required. There is no self being constructed or protected. There is just what is here, and it is enough. The Buddhist tradition calls this sufficiency the felt signature of the non-clinging mind. It does not depend on circumstances being perfect. It depends only on the clinging having paused. What practice asks us to do is not manufacture these moments, but start noticing them. They come more often than most people realize. They pass without credit because they are small, and because the gripping mind, the one that values drama and struggle and achievement, does not know what to do with a moment where nothing is missing. But those moments are the teacher. They are evidence, real and unmistakable and personal, that the mind of freedom is not a foreign place. It is home, and we have been there before, many times, without knowing what to call it. There is a simple phrase that captures the feeling of these moments from the inside. It is enough just to be alive. Nothing added, nothing improved, nothing on its way. Just sitting with a warm cup as the evening comes on, and the plain fact of being here is somehow complete. Most of the time we live at a slight lean, tipped forward into the next thing, and from that leaning posture, simply being alive never feels like enough. Something always seems to be missing, and we go looking for it in the next purchase, the next plan, the next improvement. The glimpse moments tell a different story. When the leaning stops, even for a minute, enough was here the whole time. Modern life makes these glimpses easy to miss because it fills every gap where they might be noticed. The minute of waiting becomes a minute of scrolling. The pause between tasks becomes another task. The evening quiet gets covered with one more episode, one more update, one more thing. None of this is wrong, but it means the mind of freedom keeps visiting an occupied house. It arrives in the small gaps, finds every room full, and slips away unnoticed. The sandal maker's life had gaps everywhere, and his song lived in them. Many lives today have almost none, and then we wonder why peace feels so scarce. It is not scarce. It is crowded out. When the sandal maker returned the silver and sat down at his bench and opened his mouth and the song came back, he was not doing anything special. He was returning to what was already true about his life before the complication arrived. The song had not gone anywhere. It had only been crowded out by a kind of vigilance that was never needed in the first place. Deep contentment changes what we see. When a person is settled, deeply at ease, other people look different. A stranger who might have triggered judgment on an anxious day can pass by without causing a ripple. The same situation that felt urgent yesterday can be seen today for what it actually is, smaller than it seemed, less personal, less permanent. Contentment does not dull perception. It clears it. The gripping mind sees threats and opportunities. The open mind sees the world. Over the coming hours or the next few days, there may be a moment when the mind is already at ease. It might come at the end of some small task. It might come while watching light change on a wall. It might come for no reason at all, just a pause in the stream of wanting and worrying, a gap where everything is briefly fine. If such a moment shows up, there is nothing to do with it. Just notice. Just let it register. That, right there, is the mind that does not cling. It has been here before. It will come again. Rest here for a moment, and we will move on together when you are ready. There is a teaching in Buddhism about the way we relate to the world, and it can be stated simply. Most of us spend most of our time looking at objects, things outside us to want or fear, things inside us to protect or improve, possessions, reputations, opinions, plans, memories, hopes. Each one feels solid. Each one seems to deserve our attention, and together They fill the space of a life so completely that nothing else appears to be there. But there is something else there. In any room, there are the objects, and there is the space that holds them. We look at the furniture, the walls, the window. We rarely look at the space. And yet without the space, none of the objects could exist. There would be no room for them. The Buddhist tradition says something similar about the mind. There are the contents of the mind, the thoughts, the feelings, the reactions, the constant parade of things to manage. And there is the awareness that holds them all, vast and unmarked, present before any thought arrives, and still present after every thought departs. It is the mind that does not cling, and we overlook it for the same reason we overlook the space in a room. It does not do anything. It does not announce itself. It makes no demands. And the acquiring mind, the part of us that is always looking for the next useful thing, walks right past it every time. Tonight, we turn toward that space. Long ago, in a wide valley below a mountain monastery, a young herdsman and his wife began their married life with almost nothing. A few horses, a pair of cows, a small flock of sheep, thin from the winter. They worked from before dawn until well after dark, and they worked together, side by side, year after year. They were good at what they did. Seasons passed, and the herds grew. What had been a few animals became dozens, then hundreds. Horses filled the valley. Cattle covered the hillsides. The couple's name became known throughout the region, and wealthy travelers would stop at their homestead to trade, to share a meal, to pay respects to the herdsman who had built so much from so little. And through all of it, the couple kept telling each other the same thing. Soon, when things are settled, we will be happy. One more good season, one more secure year. Happiness was always just ahead, but the building never stopped. There was always a fence to mend, a new pasture to open, a dispute with a neighbor over grazing rights. When guests arrived, the couple could not sit down with them because there was always something that needed attending to first. They would serve the meal and then excuse themselves, one to the barns, the other to the accounts. They did not argue. They were not unhappy, at least not in any way they could name. But there was a weight to the days that had not been there at the beginning, when the flock was small and the evenings were long, and there was time to sit by the fire and talk about nothing in particular. Years passed. The grown children moved to distant provinces. Hard winters came, and with them, poor seasons. The herds grew smaller, sold off a few at a time to see the household through. Prices at market fell, and what had been abundant slowly became ordinary, and then lean. Over the course of many seasons, almost everything the couple had built drifted away, like snow melting off a slope in spring. When they were old, and the homestead was bare, the abbot of the mountain monastery above the valley offered them a place. They could live in the guest house and tend it for travelers, sweeping the floors, keeping the fire lit, preparing simple meals for anyone who came through. They accepted. One evening, a wealthy traveler arrived at the guest house, and as the old couple served him his supper, he learned their story. He had heard of them years ago, when their name was known in every market town in the region. He looked at them now, in their worn robes, with their careful hands and their calm faces, and he felt a pang of sympathy. "It must be difficult," he said, not unkindly, "to remember all that you had, and to live like this." The old herdsman smiled and glanced at his wife. "If we told you the truth," he said, "you would not believe us. Ask her. She will tell you plainly. She always does." The traveler turned to the wife. She set down the teapot and folded her hands. "For 50 years," she said, "my husband and I searched for happiness. While we were building, while the herds were growing, while the guests came and went, and the work never ended, we searched. And we never found it. We were too busy, too full. Every day there was something to manage, something to protect, something to worry about, and there was never a moment left over for anything else." She paused, looking at the fire. "Now that nothing is left," she said, "we have found it. We wake in the morning and speak a loving word to each other. We have time to sit. We have time to tend our hearts. We have time to watch the light come over the mountain. For 50 years we searched for happiness, and we never found it. Now that our hands are empty, it was here all along." The traveler stared at her. Then he looked at the old herdsman, who was nodding slowly. The traveler laughed, and then his laughter faded into something more uncertain, and then he was silent for a long time. This story is not a lesson about poverty being better than wealth, or about giving everything away. It is a story about the difference between the objects in a room and the space that holds them. The old couple's life had been completely filled with things to tend, herds and accounts and guests and fences and worries. Each one was real. Each one mattered. But together they took up all the room, and there was nothing left over for the life itself. What the wife discovered, in the simplicity of the guest house, was not a new kind of happiness. It was the original happiness, the one that had been there all along underneath the accumulation. The space in the room, which had always existed but had been crowded with furniture from wall to wall, finally had room to breathe. And what lived in that space was what she had been searching for the whole time: a morning greeting, a moment by the fire, the light on the mountain. None of it was new. All of it had been available for 50 years. The Buddhist tradition describes this pattern with the word objectification. It means relating to life primarily through objects, things to acquire, defend, compare, improve, or display. It includes physical objects, but it also includes inner ones, reputations, self-images, opinions, even spiritual experiences. Anything the mind can turn into a possession and hold tightly becomes an object. And when the mind is full of objects, there is no room for the space. The teachings point out that this objectification is one of the root sources of suffering, because objects need constant maintenance. They can be lost, stolen, damaged, or outgrown. And the energy spent protecting them is energy that cannot flow into anything else. It is like carrying a heavy pack up a mountain trail. The trail is beautiful, but the weight makes it impossible to look up. The radical invitation of the tradition is to turn around, to stop looking at the objects just for a moment, and to notice the space that holds them. This is not a withdrawal from life. The old couple still swept floors and prepared meals and greeted travelers. The life continues exactly as it was, but the orientation shifts. Instead of living from object to object, gripping each one and reaching for the next, there is a moment of resting in the open field that contains them all. And that open field, that space, has a remarkable quality. It does not ask for anything. It does not need protecting. It cannot be lost. It is the one thing in a life that is not an object and therefore cannot be taken away. At the edge of a mountain village, long ago, a wandering forest monk settled down beneath a tree as the evening came on. He had been walking for many days. His robes were dusty, and his bag was nearly empty, but his face was restful, and his eyes were clear. Just as the last light was leaving the sky, a villager came running up the path. He was out of breath, and his eyes were wide. "The stone," he said. "Give me the precious stone." The monk looked at him calmly. "What stone?" "Last night, I had a dream," the villager said. "A dream told me that if I came to the edge of the village at dusk, I would find a monk who would give me a precious stone that would make me wealthy beyond anything I could imagine." The monk thought for a moment. Then he reached into his bag and pulled out a large stone. Even in the fading light, the villager could see what it was. A diamond. It was immense, as large as a fist, the kind of stone that would buy 100 houses, 1,000 fields. "Is this what you mean?" the monk said. "I found it on a forest path some days ago. You are welcome to have it." The villager could barely speak. He took the diamond in both hands, thanked the monk, and hurried back down the path toward the village. His heart was pounding. His mind was already racing with plans, the land he would buy, the house he would build, the respect he would finally command. That night, alone in his room, the villager placed the diamond beside his sleeping mat and lay down. But sleep would not come. His thoughts kept circling back to the stone, unable to rest anywhere else. He moved it beside his mat, then under his pillow, then into the folds of his robe, and no place felt quite right. The house made its small evening sounds, and he found himself listening to each one. As the night went on, the diamond seemed to grow larger in his mind, and everything else grew smaller. The plans that had delighted him at sunset now felt heavy, like more things to carry. By the time the sky began to lighten, his whole world had narrowed down to one object and the care of keeping it, and he was very tired. When the first grey light appeared in the window, the villager got up, took the diamond, and walked back to the edge of the village. The monk was still there, sitting beneath the same tree, looking exactly as he had the evening before, restful, clear-eyed, unhurried. He had nothing in his bag and nothing in his hands. The villager held out the diamond. "Take it back," he said. "It has kept me awake the whole night." The monk took it without surprise. "But give me something else instead," the villager said. "Give me whatever it is inside you that made it possible to hand this away so easily." The monk looked at him for a long moment. Then he smiled, and the smile held no pride or cleverness, only warmth. "I carried that stone in my bag for many days," the monk said. "I slept soundly every one of those nights, and just as soundly last night, with nothing in my bag at all. You carried it for a single night, and it took your sleep away. So the trouble was never in the stone. It was in the holding. You held it tightly, and everything you held onto you. I hold things lightly, and so nothing weighs on me. What you are asking for is not a treasure to be handed over. It is a way of holding. Hold everything the same open way you just handed me that diamond, and you will be richer than any stone could ever make you." The villager stood still. The morning birds were beginning to sing. The light was coming up over the hills. He looked down at his own hands, still open from giving the diamond away, and he realized something. At this moment, holding nothing, he felt lighter and more at peace than he had felt all night, holding the greatest treasure in the land. He did not understand it fully, but he felt it. and the feeling was worth more than any stone. The monk walked with that diamond in his bag for days and slept peacefully under the open sky every night. The villager kept it for a single night and could not rest in his own home. Nothing about the stone was different. The only difference was the grip. This is one of the oldest and simplest teachings in Buddhism. The Buddha taught that our unease does not come from the things themselves. It comes from the clinging. And because the clinging is ours, the peace is ours too. It does not depend on getting the right things or getting rid of the wrong ones. It depends on how we hold whatever is already in our hands. The forest master Ajahn Chah said it as plainly as it can be said. If you let go a little, you will have a little peace. If you let go a lot, you will have a lot of peace. If you let go completely, you will have complete peace. Letting go, in his teaching, was never about throwing things away. The monk in the story still had a bag, still ate, still walked his road. Letting go is something that happens inside the hand, while the hand goes on doing everything it did before. And this loosening applies to more than diamonds and silver. We hold plenty of things that never sit on a shelf. An opinion we would defend to the end. A picture of ourselves we work hard to keep polished. An old hurt we keep returning to. Even a spiritual experience can be gripped this way, saved and protected and shown off like a jewel. Whatever the mind wraps its fingers around becomes one more heavy stone, and it keeps us awake in exactly the same way. There is even an old Zen image for what happens when we try to grip the letting go itself. It is like trying to touch your right elbow with your right hand. The harder you try to grab it, the more clearly you see that grabbing is the one thing it cannot be. Peace is not one more possession to add to the pile. It is what is left when the pile stops being squeezed. So the invitation of this teaching is small and practical. It is a loosening. In any room, there is the furniture, and there is the space around the furniture. In any mind, there are the thoughts, and there is the openness holding them. The thoughts come and go. The openness stays, asking nothing, and it cannot be stolen, because it was never an object in the first place. The villager felt it at dawn with his hands empty, and nothing in his village had changed except the grip. If at some point tonight or tomorrow a room feels full of tasks, of noise, of things pressing for attention, there may be a chance to let the eyes rest on the empty space between the objects. The gap between the chair and the wall. The stretch of floor where nothing sits. The air above the table. It is a small thing, resting on the space instead of the furniture. But it carries the same ease the villager found at dawn, standing with open hands, lighter without the stone than he had ever been with it. Take whatever time you need here. Whenever the next step calls, we will walk it together. The Buddha once told his monks that everything we know was put together at some point. A house was built, board by board. A thought was formed. A mood grew out of the day's events. And whatever was put together will one day come apart. That is just how made things are. But then he added this: there is also something that was never put together at all. And because it was never put together, it cannot come apart. He called it the unmade, the release. If it did not exist, he said, there would be no freedom to be found anywhere. But it does exist, and so there is. The mind that does not cling is what he was pointing at. And it has one unusual quality that takes some getting used to. Everything else in our experience can be found somewhere. A thought appears and we can describe it. A feeling arises and we can name it. But the open awareness that holds all of it has no address. It has no shape and no color. Search for it, and the search comes back empty-handed every time. Most of us hear that and assume something has gone wrong. If it cannot be found, maybe it is not there. But there is another possibility, and it is the one this whole tradition rests on. Some things cannot be found because they are missing, and some things cannot be found because they are everywhere. In a wide river that ran down from the mountains, there once lived a little fish. She was young and curious, and one day she overheard the older fish speaking of something called the Great Ocean. They described it with wonder in their voices. Vast, they said, deeper than anyone could dive, alive with currents and light. The little fish felt something stir in her, and from that day on, she wanted only one thing, to find the great ocean. She began to search. She explored the deep pools where the water turned dark and cool. She followed the shallows where sunlight striped the sand. She swam up side streams and down again, past sunken logs and swaying weeds, looking into every corner of her world. In spring she searched the flooded meadows, and in summer the shaded banks, and in autumn she followed the fallen leaves as they drifted along the current, thinking they might be traveling toward the ocean and could show her the road. The ocean was in none of these places. Seasons passed, and her searching grew tired and a little sad. At last she gathered her courage and approached the oldest fish in the river, a great grey elder who rested near the roots of a willow. "Please," she said, "you have lived long. Can you tell me where to find the great ocean?" The old fish looked at her kindly. "The ocean," he said, "is what you are swimming in. It is what has carried you your whole life. You are in it at this moment." The little fish flicked her tail. "This?" she said. "This is only water. Water is ordinary. It is everywhere. What I am looking for is the ocean." And she swam off, disappointed, to continue her search elsewhere. Upstream from that river, on a hill above the water, stood a temple. And in that temple, on an evening late in autumn, a young monk knelt before his teacher, an old nun with steady eyes, and made a confession that had been building in him for years. "I have searched everywhere," he said. "I have climbed the holy mountains. I have sat in silent halls until my legs ached. I have visited famous masters and read every text in this temple's library. I set out to find the boundless mind the Buddha spoke of, the awareness that clings to nothing. And I have found nothing at all. Wherever I go, there is only ordinary life. Eating, walking, sweeping, breathing. I am beginning to think the boundless mind is a story." The teacher did not answer right away. The evening sun was coming through the window, laying warm light across the wooden floor. Somewhere outside, sparrows were settling into a tree, and their small voices filled the courtyard. A kettle ticked softly as it cooled. The monk's own breath moved in and out, easy and unnoticed. She let all of it be there for a while. Then she said, "Tell me again what you found on your search." "Ordinary life," he said. "Only ordinary life." "And what is it," she asked, "that has been aware of every step of it? Aware of the mountains, aware of the silent halls, aware of the eating and the sweeping, aware of this light on the floor, right now, and the birds, and your own breathing?" The monk looked at the light on the floor. He listened to the sparrows. And very slowly, something in his face changed, like a man who has been out searching all day for the hat that is sitting on his head. You could not find it, the teacher said, because you were looking for one more thing among the things. It is not among them. It is what they all appear in. You have been swimming in it since the day you were born. The little fish and the young monk made the same mistake, and it is the most understandable mistake in the world. They went looking for something great, and so they searched among great things. Deep pools, holy mountains, famous masters, and the whole time, the thing they were seeking was so close, so constant, and so ordinary seeming, that it never once looked like a discovery. A treasure is supposed to be rare and far away. This one is common as air and nearer than the skin, and that is exactly why it stays hidden. This is why awareness goes unnoticed. It is not hiding. It has simply never been absent, and we only notice things that come and go. A sound is noticed because it starts and stops. A feeling is noticed because it rises and fades. But the knowing itself, the open space in which every sound and feeling appears, has been running without a single break for as long as we can remember. There was never a moment of contrast, so there was never a moment of noticing. There is a second reason we walk past it, and it is even simpler. The space does nothing for us. It cannot be spent, traded, eaten, or shown off. The part of the mind that is always shopping for the next useful thing takes one glance at open awareness, finds nothing to gain from it, and moves along. In a room, the eyes go to the furniture for the same reason. The chairs can be sat on. The table can hold dinner. The space between them offers nothing, and so it is never seen, even though every chair and table depends on it completely. The tradition offers a lovely image for what this openness actually gives. Think of a lotus. While it is a closed bud, it is wrapped tightly around itself, and there is no room inside it for anything. When it opens, it does not gain any new material. The petals were all already there. What it gains is space. An open blossom holds room at its center, room for light, for air, for whatever comes. That is what the open mind is. Nothing has been added to it. It has simply unclosed, and now there is somewhere for life to land. And here is the part that can bring real ease. Because this awareness cannot be found as an object, it also cannot be lost as one. Everything that can be located can be taken away. A house can be lost. A reputation can be lost. Even a cherished state of calm can be lost, as anyone knows who has felt a peaceful mood dissolve in traffic. But the awareness that watched the calm come and watched it go did not go anywhere. It cannot be stolen because it was never a possession. It cannot be broken because it was never built. When the young monk's searching stopped, the seeker in him relaxed, and what remained was the seeing itself, simple and wide open, needing nothing. Night after night, in a small temple on a hillside, an old monk kept a practice of his own. When the day's work was done and the lamps were low, he would kneel facing the open window and bow, slowly and with his whole heart, toward the boundless mind. He could not see it. He could not prove it was there. But every evening for 40 years he had turned toward it, and the turning had become the deepest part of his life. He had bowed through springs when the plum trees filled the window with white blossoms, and through winters when his breath hung in the cold air of the hall. He had bowed on evenings when his heart was full, and evenings when it was heavy, and the bow had carried him through both. One autumn, a traveling scholar stayed at the temple. He was a sincere man, learned and honest, and he watched the old monk's evening bows with growing puzzlement. Finally, one night, he asked, "Forgive me," the scholar said. "I have watched you bow each evening at the window. May I ask which god you honor? Is it a spirit of the mountain? An ancestor, perhaps?" The old monk shook his head. "There is no god at my window," he said. "I bow to the boundless mind, the mind of freedom, the one that clings to nothing." The Buddha pointed to it, and for 40 years I have turned toward it each evening. The scholar frowned. "But that is nothing that can be seen or touched or found," he said. "A mountain spirit at least has a mountain. So may I ask you, in all these years, has it ever answered you? Has anything ever come back?" The old monk paused. He searched himself for an answer, and he found none. That night he did not bow. He lay down with a heaviness in his chest, and for the first time in 40 years, the evening passed without the turning. He slept, and in his sleep a dream came. In the dream, he was sitting in the temple, and an ancient teacher was sitting across from him, a woman with a face so calm it seemed to hold the whole room. She looked at him for a long time before she spoke. "Why did you stop?" she asked. "Because nothing ever answered," the old monk said. 40 years of turning toward it, and never once a reply. "You were waiting for a reply to come from outside," the teacher said, "like a letter being answered. But think about what actually happened every evening for 40 years. The day would end, and something in you would rise, and it would carry you to that window. Where do you think that pull came from? A heart with no freedom in it would never long for freedom. The longing you feel for the boundless mind is the boundless mind, already alive in you, drawing you toward itself. It was never silent. It answered you every evening from the inside by bringing you to the window." The old monk was quiet. The teacher went on, "And look at what the longing actually wants. It does not want a voice from the sky. It does not want a visitor. It wants to rest. It wants to stop holding on. And nothing will arrive one day to give it that, because letting go is not something that arrives. It is something you do. Each time you truly let go, the longing is satisfied, right then, completely. A heart that has let go is the very thing you have been longing for." The old monk woke before dawn, with tears on his face and lightness in his chest. Nothing had come in the night, but he had stopped waiting, and the waiting he saw now had been the whole ache. That evening, when the lamps were low, he knelt at the window and bowed. The scholar, watching from the doorway, saw the old man's face and asked no more questions. The doubt the scholar raised is one almost everyone carries about the deepest things. If it cannot be found, how do we know it is there? If it never answers, why keep turning toward it? The desire, at its heart, is the desire to rest, to stop gripping. The old monk was never longing for an object, or an experience, or a visit from something outside him. What he was longing for, what everyone is longing for, underneath the more specific wants, is the peace of a mind that has let go. The heart wants to stop holding on. That is the real desire behind the bowing and behind most of our reaching. And because what it wants is a letting go, it can be satisfied any evening, in any room. Thirst only exists because water exists and the body knows it. The longing for peace only exists because the peace is already in us, waiting on nothing but the release. There is a reason the Buddha spoke of the highest freedom mostly by what falls away, calling it the release, the letting go, the unbinding. He knew his listeners. He knew that anything described in glowing terms would be turned, within a week, into one more prize to chase. Give the mind a picture of perfect peace, and it will start grasping at peace, and the grasping will chase the peace away. So he gave the collector in us nothing to collect. It is a kindness built right into the language, protecting us from the last and subtlest mistake, which is clinging to the idea of not clinging. A kind of trust is needed here because the boundless mind can never be proven. It cannot be shown to a doubting scholar, and no one can hand it to us. But this is not the kind of trust that asks anyone to believe a story. It is closer to trusting that when the hand opens, the weight will leave it. That can be tested any day, with any small grip. The old monk could never point to what he bowed toward, and in the end it did not matter. What mattered was what the turning did to him, evening after evening, for 40 years. Some things prove themselves only by being lived. That demand runs deep in modern life. We live in a time when everything is expected to be measurable. Steps are counted, sleep is scored, moods are tracked in an app. Whatever cannot be weighed or displayed starts to feel unreal. And so the most important thing about us, the open awareness reading every measurement, gets dismissed because it is the one thing that will never show up on a screen. There is real rest in letting one part of life stay unmeasured. No number to improve. No progress to lose. Just the wide, unfindable water, holding everything, asking nothing. And nothing special has to happen for this rest to be available. The water does not appear only in temples or on hillsides. It is here while dishes are washed and while a bus is waited for. It is here in the middle of a busy afternoon, holding the busyness itself. A person who remembers this, even once in a day, has done what the little fish never quite managed. She stopped mid-swim, felt the water on every side, and realized that the search could end without anything being found, because nothing was ever missing. Sometime in the coming days, in an idle moment, a small question may drift up on its own. Where is the awareness that is taking all this in? There is no need to hunt for an answer. The not finding is the answer, and it is a friendly one. It means the search can be called off, the whole long search, because nothing was ever lost. Like the little fish, like the searching monk, like the old man bowing at his window, whatever is looking has been resting in it the whole time. Let everything settle for a bit. The road goes on gently from here, and we will follow it when you are ready. The forest master Ajahn Chah used to walk the grounds of his monastery in the early morning, greeting the monks as they went about their work. Often he would stop beside one of them, look at him with bright, friendly eyes, and ask, "Are you suffering today?" If the monk admitted that he was, Ajahn Chah would smile warmly and say, "Oh, you must be clinging." And then he would walk on. He was not being unkind. He was pointing at one of the most freeing discoveries in all of Buddhism. Pain and suffering are two different things. Pain is what life brings. An aching back, a cold winter, a plan that falls apart, a hard word from someone we love. No life avoids these. and the Buddha never promised that practice would remove them. What he taught was subtler and far more hopeful. On top of the pain that life brings, the mind adds a second layer: resistance, argument, the tight inner voice that says this should not be happening. That second layer is the suffering, and unlike the pain, it is optional. The Buddha described it with the image of two arrows. When something painful happens, it is as if a first arrow strikes. That one cannot always be helped. But then we shoot a second arrow into the same spot ourselves: the fighting, the blaming, the refusing. The first arrow hurts. The second one is the suffering, and the second one is ours to put down. An old master and her student sat beside a river at dusk. The student had been struggling for months with a hardship in his life, one that would not move no matter how he pushed against it, and the pushing had worn him thin. The master watched the water slide past for a while, and then she said, "Let me tell you about a stream. Once, a stream was born from a spring high in the mountains. She came down through pine forests and green valleys, and she was strong. When boulders stood in her way, she went around them. When fallen trees blocked her, she found a path beneath. She crossed every kind of country, and every barrier gave way in time, and she came to trust her own strength completely. Then one day she reached the edge of a desert. Sand stretched ahead of her farther than seeing. She gathered herself and ran forward, sure this would be like every crossing before it. But as fast as her waters ran into the sand, they vanished. She pulled back, gathered again, and pushed harder. The sand drank everything she sent. She tried again and again, flinging herself at the edge of the desert from morning until night, and for all her effort she gained nothing at all. She grew tired in a manner she had never been tired before. And then, out of the stillness of the sand itself, came a whisper. "The wind crosses the desert," it said. "So can the stream." "How?" she asked. "I have been trying with all my strength. The wind can fly. I cannot. By pushing in your old accustomed manner, you will never get across," the whisper said. "You will only tire yourself into a standstill. You must let the wind carry you. Let yourself be lifted into it, and it will bear you over." The stream was afraid. "If I rise into the wind, I will lose myself. I have always been a stream. This shape, these banks, this running water, this is who I am. If I let it go, how do I know I will ever get it back?" "The wind does this work every day," the sands whispered. "It lifts water, carries it across, and lets it fall again on the far mountains. The water falls as rain, and the rain gathers, and a stream runs on. You cannot stay as you are in either case. Held here, you become a still and shrinking pool. Carried over, your true heart crosses the desert and lives." For a long time the stream hesitated at the edge of the sand, holding on to the only self she had ever known. And then, slowly, she stopped her thrashing. She grew calm. And in her calmness she let go, and rose as fine mist into the open arms of the wind. The wind bore her up with great tenderness, over the whole face of the desert, mile after golden mile, and set her down as soft rain on the peaks of the far mountains. And the rain gathered, and ran downhill, and became a stream again, running bright and strong through new valleys she had never seen. And it is said she carried something with her ever after, a memory of the crossing, and she was never afraid in the old way again. The master fell silent. The river in front of them went on sliding past in the last light. After a while, The student let out a long breath, and his shoulders came down from where they had been living, somewhere up near his ears. The next morning, the master found him at the water's edge again, watching the current. "The hardship is still there," he said to her. "Nothing about it changed in the night." He paused. "But something in me changed. I think I have been the stream at the edge of the sand for a long time now, and I did not know there was any other way to meet a desert." The desert in that story never moves. That is the part to hold gently. The stream does not defeat the sand, and no cleverness makes the barrier disappear. Some things in a life are like that. They are simply there, and no amount of force changes them. But look at where the stream's misery actually lived. It was in the thrashing. The desert took nothing from her that mattered. The flinging herself at the edge, over and over, is what wore her down. Her pain was the barrier. Her suffering was the war she declared on it. And the moment the war ended, a crossing appeared that had been available the whole time. This is exactly what Ajahn Chah was pointing at on his morning walks. You must be clinging. Sounds almost too simple, but it names the second arrow precisely. The clinging is the refusal, the gripping insistence that this moment be different than it is. There is a similar teaching in the Taoist tradition in the book of Zhuangzi, which notices that a relaxed man who tumbles from a slow cart is rarely hurt, while a tense one is bruised by the smallest jolt. The difference is the bracing. So much of what we call being hurt by life is really the stiffness with which we meet it. Notice also the tone of Ajahn Chah's question. He asked it cheerfully, almost like a man asking about the weather. That tone is itself part of the teaching. In his monastery, suffering was never treated as shameful, and never as a verdict on the sufferer. It was treated as a signal. When suffering appears, it is pointing at a place where the hand has closed around something, and that is useful information delivered by a friend. A person who learns to meet their own suffering this way, with a kind of warm curiosity rather than dread, has already changed their relationship to it. The suffering stops being an enemy at the gate and becomes a messenger, and messengers can be thanked and released. Ajahn Chah also taught that suffering itself comes in two kinds. There are two kinds of suffering, he said. The suffering that leads to more suffering and the suffering that leads to the end of suffering. The first kind is the familiar loop. Pain arrives. We resist it. The resistance hurts. We resist the hurt, and around it goes. The second kind is what happens when we finally stop running and let a difficulty be fully felt. That feeling is uncomfortable too, but it is the discomfort of a door opening rather than a wheel turning. The stream at the desert's edge knew both kinds. The thrashing was the first. The trembling moment of letting go into the wind was the second. Only one of them led anywhere. And this applies to small pains just as much as great ones. It is tempting to save this teaching for the big hardships, but the second arrow is fired dozens of times on an ordinary day, in miniature. The vegetables are not cooked the way we like, and a little complaint fires off inside. The weather ruins a plan, and something in the chest tightens and argues. Each one is tiny, but these small moments are where the habit lives, and they are also where it can soften. A person who can notice one small inner complaint and let the situation simply be what it is practicing the exact same release the stream found at the edge of the desert. And a habit softened in small moments is a habit that holds when the large ones come. In a farmhouse near a village temple, there once lived a family of 4, a farmer, his wife, their small son, and the farmer's old mother. The grandmother had spent her whole life working, raising children, tending fields, feeding everyone who came through her door. Now she was old, and her hands had begun to tremble. She was not ashamed of them. These were hands that had planted 50 springs of rice and folded 1,000 blankets, and she carried their trembling calmly, as one more season of a long life. At the evening meal, her spoon would shake sometimes, and a little broth would spill on the table. She would smile, wipe it, and go on. It was the family who found it hard. The farmer and his wife loved her dearly, and that was exactly the trouble. Watching her hands reminded them of things they did not want to feel, so they looked away when it happened, kindly, to spare her, they told themselves. They stopped mentioning it. Then they stopped mentioning other things too, in case the conversation wandered near it. When her bowl slipped one evening and broke on the floor, nobody scolded her, and by the next meal, a new bowl sat at her place, a plain wooden one that could not break, brought with the best of intentions, so that nothing would embarrass her again. The grandmother thanked them and said nothing more. But she felt what was happening. She was still at the table, in her same seat, and yet dinner had grown quiet around her, eyes dropping politely whenever her spoon wavered. The trembling did not trouble her. The hush did. Month by month, she felt herself becoming somehow invisible at a table she had cooked for over half her life. Some weeks later, on a rest day, the farmer noticed his small son sitting by the woodpile, working with great concentration. The boy had gathered scraps of cedar and was carving them, his little face serious, his tongue pressed to his lip. "What are you making?" the farmer asked. The boy did not look up from his work. "Little wooden bowls," he said. "One for you and one for mother. For when you are old and your hands shake, so they will be ready." The farmer stood very still. Across the yard, his wife had paused in the doorway, and she had heard it too. They looked at each other, and their eyes filled, and everything they had been looking away from for months arrived all at once. The long years in their mother's hands, the trembling that would one day be their own, the hush that their kindness had built around her. That evening at dinner, the farmer's wife sat close beside the grandmother and asked her, for the first time in a long while, to tell the story of the year the river froze, the one the family had heard 50 times and loved anyway. The old woman's eyes brightened. She talked, and her spoon shook, and broth spilled, and nobody looked away, and it did not matter in the slightest. The meal that night was warmer than any the house had known in a long time, and the grandmother's face, in the lamplight, was at rest. The pain in that house was real, and no one caused it. The grandmother's hands trembled because she was old. That is a first arrow, and it comes, sooner or later, to every family in the world. She herself had already made peace with it. Her hands had earned their trembling, and she carried it without complaint. The suffering was something else, and it was made entirely of kindness that looked away. The farmer and his wife never meant her any harm. They looked away to spare her, brought the wooden bowl to protect her, went quiet to avoid embarrassing her. And every one of those loving moves added a little more distance. The trembling never hurt her. The hush did. 3 people ended up quietly lonely in a house where one person was simply old, and not one of them had done anything but try to be kind. Then a child, too young to have learned looking away, let the truth in without flinching. Your hands will shake someday too. And the moment the parents let themselves feel it fully, the response appeared on its own. Nobody had to work it out. The feeling itself knew what to do. Sit close. Ask for the story. Let it spill. When pain is allowed all the way in, it very often carries its own instructions, and they are usually instructions of tenderness. This is the quiet second half of the teaching on the two arrows. Putting down the second arrow does not just spare us our own added suffering. It frees the heart to respond well. A person busy resisting has no hands free for anything else. A person who has allowed the pain of a situation, fully and without argument, can finally act with clarity and warmth. That is why the traditions place such trust in simply feeling what is here. It has to be all right to feel the pain of things. That allowing is where wise action is born. Most homes have a hush like that somewhere. Some difficulty that everyone politely steps around because looking at it directly is hard. An aging in the family. A change in the body. A situation that keeps being put off. The teaching does not ask anyone to fix these tonight. It only points out, kindly, that the distance we keep from a pain is usually more costly than the pain itself, and that the people on both sides of the hush usually feel it. It helps to be honest about what this path promises and what it does not. Buddhism has never promised a life without pain. Hands will tremble. Streams will meet deserts. Plans will fall through, and hearts will ache, and no practice on earth prevents any of it. What the path promises is the end of the confusion we pour on top. The end of the war, the bracing, the looking away, the second arrow. And that turns out to be most of the weight. People who have carried a hardship for years often discover, when they finally set down the argument with it, that the hardship itself was lighter than the argument ever was. The pain remains a guest in the house. It simply stops being an enemy occupying it. Somewhere in the days ahead, a discomfort may arrive, large or small. A sore shoulder, a spoiled plan, a moment of sadness. If it does, there may be a moment to wonder, softly, without any pressure, how much of this is the thing itself, and how much is my argument with it. No answer is required, and nothing needs fixing. Sometimes the wondering alone is enough to let the second arrow drop unfired. Rest in this for as long as feels right. There is more ahead, and no hurry at all to reach it. There is a proverb from Japan, spoken for centuries in temples and farmhouses alike. Fall down 7 times, get up 8. Nothing in it says anything about not falling. The falling is assumed. It is taken for granted that a human life includes stumbling, getting gripped, losing the thread, being carried off by old habits again and again. The proverb has no interest in preventing any of that. Its entire teaching lives in what happens next. Because there is a moment familiar to everyone who has ever tried to live with more awareness. The moment of noticing we are caught in worry, caught in irritation, caught in wanting, caught in some spinning story about tomorrow. And in the very instant of noticing, something else usually rushes in right behind it, a verdict. I did it again. I should be past this by now. What is wrong with me? The first caughtness was just a mind doing what minds do. The verdict is a second caughtness, stacked on top of the first, and it is the heavier of the two. It usually lasts longer as well. The irritation might have passed in a minute, The disappointment in ourselves about the irritation can shadow a whole afternoon. That second layer is what we turn to now. The instruction for it is short. When caught, just be caught. Notice the worry or the irritation and add nothing on top of it. No verdict, no conclusions about what it says about us. Met this way, without the extra layer, the caughtness tends to pass by itself. High above the tree line, where the air was thin and the silence was wide, an old hermit lived in a hut of stone and cedar. Far below, in the valley, stood a monastery, and in that monastery lived a young monk with a sincere heart and a temper he could not seem to outgrow. He worked hard at his practice, and still, several times a season, the old irritation would rise up and take him. A sharp word to a fellow monk over a chore. A morning lost to resentment about something small. Each time it happened, the shame afterward was worse than the anger itself. And each time, when the season turned, he would climb the long path up the mountain to see the hermit, because the hermit was known to be wise, and the young monk badly needed someone to tell his failures to. On his first visit, he knelt on the stone floor of the hut and confessed everything. The sharp words, the resentment, the vows he had made to himself and broken. "I have fallen," he said at last, staring at the floor. The hermit, who was mending a sandal by the fire, looked up. "Get up again," he said. The young monk waited for more. There was no more. He walked back down the mountain, unsure what he had received. A season passed, and the temper rose again, and again he was ashamed. He climbed the mountain. "I got up," he told the hermit. "I truly did. I practiced with care for months, and then I fell again." "Get up again," the hermit said, and poured him a bowl of tea. Another season, another fall, another long climb. This time the young monk's shame had grown teeth. On the path up, he rehearsed his confession like a man preparing for judgment. He had decided, somewhere on the switchbacks, that this third failure proved something about him, that he was not made for the path, that other monks had something he lacked. He knelt on the stone floor and it all poured out. The fall, and then everything he had stacked on top of the fall. The verdicts, the comparisons, the certainty that 3 failures made him a failure. The hermit listened to the whole of it without moving. When it was finished, he set down his work. "You have told me 2 stories," he said. "The first story is that anger rose in you, and you were caught, and it passed. That story is short. It is the story of every human being who has ever lived. The second story is everything you built on top of it on your way up my mountain. That story is long, and it is the only one of the 2 that is crushing you." The young monk looked up. "But you live here in stillness," he said. "Surely nothing catches you anymore." The hermit smiled and glanced around his small hut. "This morning the wind blew smoke back down my chimney," he said, "and for a moment I was a man arguing with a chimney. The difference between us is only this. When I notice I am caught, and that is the end of the matter. I do not then climb a mountain inside myself to confess it. But how many times must I get up?" The young monk asked. 100? 1,000? Where does it end? A person is simply found where they are, rising or resting, the hermit said. That is all. Falling is not the opposite of the path, young one. Falling is part of the path. The practice was never called not falling. The practice is the getting up. And the getting up goes easiest for the one who skips the verdict and simply stands. The young monk walked down the mountain lighter than he had ever walked down it before. The temper did not vanish from his life that year or the next. But the long second story stopped being written. When he fell, he got up, the same as a man who stumbles on a route, gets up, brushes his robe, and continues walking. And the monks in the valley noticed that with every passing year, there was less and less falling to get up from, though no one could say exactly when the change had happened. The hermit's words draw a clear line between two very different things that usually get tangled together. There is the caughtness itself, the anger or worry or wanting that grips the mind. And there is our reaction to having been caught, the judgment, the shame, the discouraging conclusions about ourselves. The first is weather. The second is a war about the weather. A person can spend years fighting that second war without ever noticing it is a separate thing, with a separate cause and a separate off switch. The teaching says the weather was never the real problem. Minds produce moods and reactions, just as skies produce clouds, and no amount of self-criticism has ever stopped a sky from clouding. What can change is the war. And here is the strange, wonderful part. The moment the war stops, the weather itself begins to pass through faster. A caughtness that is simply seen, allowed, and not argued with tends to loosen on its own, often quickly. It is the resistance that gives it something to push against, and the shame that gives it a reason to return. There is a practical side to this that the meditation traditions have known for a very long time. When we are caught, most of the struggle happens in the head, in words. The mind explains the worry, argues with the worry, explains the argument, and around it circles, sometimes for hours. Thought is wonderful at many things, but it is poor at finishing a feeling. What helps, again and again, is a simple shift downward, out of the words and into the body. The worry is also a sensation somewhere. A tightness in the chest, a knot in the belly, a buzzing behind the ribs. When attention settles there, without any story attached, something remarkable happens. The body knows how to process what the head can only spin. The energy of the feeling gets to move, crest, and pass, like weather actually passing instead of being debated. The young monk's shame lived entirely in the second story, the one made of words. The body only ever held the first one, and the first one was always passing. There is one more trap to name here, because sincere people fall into it constantly, and it wears a very convincing disguise. It is possible to turn even this teaching into another project. To notice a caughtness and immediately start working on it, applying awareness to it like a tool, watching for results, checking whether it has dissolved yet. Mindfulness, in the old sense, is much simpler and much lazier than that. It is just seeing. Seeing the irritation the same as one sees rain through a window, with no job to do about it. The moment awareness becomes a technique for fixing ourselves, the striving is back, and the striving is the grip. The moment it relaxes back into plain seeing, the grip has nothing left to hold with. Being caught, seen clearly and without verdict, is already the beginning of being free. The seeing is the freedom starting, which means the moment we usually treat as our worst, the moment of realizing we are gripped again, is actually a small doorway, if nothing extra is nailed on top of it. In ancient China, the sage Confucius had a student he loved above all others, a young man named Yan Hui. One day Yan Hui came to his teacher with news. "I am making progress," he said. "How so?" asked Confucius. "I have let go of the rules I was taught," Yan Hui said. "The proper forms, the ceremonies, all the ways I was told a person must appear. I no longer grip them." Confucius nodded. "That is good," he said, "but it is not yet enough." Time passed, a season or more, and Yan Hui came again. "I am making progress," he said. "I have let go of my ideas about being good. The standards I measured myself against, the constant judging of whether I was kind enough, wise enough, worthy enough. I no longer grip those either." "That is good," said Confucius, "but it is not yet enough." More time passed. The leaves turned and fell and returned. And one day, Yan Hui came to his teacher with a stillness about him that had not been there before. "I am making progress," he said. "I sit and I forget." Confucius looked at him closely. "What do you mean? You sit and forget?" "The striving falls away," Yan Hui said. "The watching of myself falls away. I stop holding the person I think I am supposed to be, and I stop holding the person I am afraid I might be. What is left simply sits, open, the same as the sky is open. That is what I mean. I sit and I forget." Confucius was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "If you have truly let go like that, then nothing pulls at you and nothing frightens you. You have gone further than your teacher." And he bowed to his own student. "From now on, allow me to follow you." Yan Hui's progress ran backward from the way we usually picture progress. He never came back having learned something new. Every visit, he had dropped something. First, the rules. Then his ideas about being good. Then the watching of himself altogether. And the more he dropped, the further along he was. The Zen master Dogen said the same thing in one line. To study the Buddha way is to study the self. To study the self is to forget the self. That is Yan Hui's sitting and forgetting. The self he forgot was not his life. It was the inner judge, the one holding the measuring stick. He did not finally measure up. He set the stick down, and what was left was a person so at ease that his own teacher bowed to him. Settling takes the time it takes. Seasons pass between those visits, and nothing could have shortened them. A field turns from green to gold, and nobody can name the day it happened. Inner change moves the same way. So the flare-ups of this month are not a final report on anyone. They are one stage of something still ripening, and the kindest response is the one Confucius gave. Keep company with it, and let the days do their work. The ending shows where all this leads. Yan Hui's stillness did not argue for itself or ask for anything, and his own teacher wanted to learn from it. Settled people are like that. Everyone has met someone whose presence makes a tense room breathe easier, whose steadiness cannot be argued with because it is not arguing back. That steadiness grows in anyone who stops going to war with their own weather. The peace made inside does not stay inside. It walks into rooms. Modern life has made self-monitoring constant. There has never been a generation that watched itself this closely, measured itself against this many others, or kept such detailed records of its own shortfalls. The watching is not the problem. The verdicts are. A mind reviewed all day by an inner critic stays braced and stirred. A mind watched the way Confucius watched Yan Hui, patiently, without verdicts, gets to settle. There is one more gift folded into this teaching, and it reaches beyond ourselves. The same release works on our grip toward others. Resentment is a verdict we keep renewing, a courtness about someone else's courtness. Someone spoke sharply to us, perhaps years ago, and the mind still climbs its mountain about it, retelling and rejudging, keeping the case open. Loosening it is sometimes called forgiveness, and in this light, forgiveness is less a grand gesture than a simple putting down. The moment is given back its freedom. So are they. So are we. The heart that learns to be patient with its own weather finds it can be patient with other people's weather too. At some point soon, the mind may get caught in something, a worry, an irritation, an old loop. It happens to every mind, most days, and it will go on happening, because that is what minds are like. If the noticing comes, there may be a chance to answer it the way Confucius answered his student. That is good, but not yet. Nothing more than that. No sentence passed, no case built, no mountain climbed. Just the kind report, and on we go. Settle here for a while, in no rush at all. The journey picks up again whenever you do. A new monk once arrived at Ajahn Chah's forest monastery and asked what the practice was about. Ajahn Chah answered in one sentence, "Our practice here is not to grasp anything." The monk looked confused. "But isn't it necessary to hold on to things sometimes?" Ajahn Chah said, "With the hands, yes, but not with the heart. When the heart grasps what is painful, it is like being bitten by a snake. And when through desire it grasps what is pleasant, it is just grasping the tail of the snake. It only takes a little longer for the head to come around and bite you." That line about the tail of the snake carries something people do not always expect from the Buddhist tradition. The pleasant things cause trouble too, when we grip them. In fact, the pleasant ones can be harder to see clearly because the grip feels so good at first. A warm feeling, a success, a moment of peace. We close our hand around it and want it to stay, and the tightening of that want is where the suffering begins. Tonight we look at wanting itself, because wanting is not the problem. Wants come and go all day, dozens of them, most of them harmless. What changes everything is whether the wanting stays open or tightens into a grip. Once, in a mountain kingdom in an ancient land, there lived a king who loved gold. He loved it more than his gardens, more than his reputation, more than anything in the world except one person, his young daughter, who came to his room each morning and put her arms around his neck. The king's love of gold was not unusual among kings. What made it different was how much he wanted. No matter how many coins filled his treasury, no matter how many golden objects lined the halls, the wanting never eased. It sat in him like a hunger that no meal could touch. Each new piece brought a moment of satisfaction, and then the satisfaction drained away, and the wanting was back, a little larger than before. One evening, walking alone in his garden, at dusk, he came upon a woman sitting among the trees. She was not from his court. She had the look of someone who had lived a very long time in the forest, and her eyes held a sadness, as if she already knew what he was going to ask. "I know your heart," she said. You wish that everything you touch would turn to gold. The king's breath caught. Yes, he said. That is exactly what I wish. She looked at him steadily. This wish can be granted, she said. But I will not pretend it is a kindness. In the morning he woke and reached for the cup of water beside his bed. The clay went cold under his fingers, and the water inside it hardened. The cup was solid gold, heavy and beautiful, and the water was gone. He lifted it, amazed. He touched the bed frame, and it changed. He touched the curtain, and the silk became a stiff sheet of gleaming metal. He walked through the palace, touching everything he passed. A wooden chair became a golden throne. A tapestry went rigid on the wall. He reached the dining hall, and for the first time, something caught. His breakfast sat before him: bread, rice, sliced fruit, a cup of broth. He reached for the bread. It went hard and cold in his hand. He tried the fruit. The same. The rice sat in the bowl like a pile of tiny coins. He could not eat. He set the food down slowly, his hands trembling, and pushed back from the table. He went into the garden. The roses were his favorite part of the morning. He bent to touch one, and the petals froze, and the scent vanished, and what had been alive and soft a moment ago became a small, perfect, dead thing in his hand. He touched another. The same. Another. The same. Within minutes, the garden was a field of golden metal, completely still, completely silent. The breeze still moved through it, but nothing moved with it. The scent was gone. The color was gone. The softness was gone. He stood among the golden roses, and for the first time, something in him shifted. He had wanted gold his whole life, and now he had it, and the garden was a graveyard of beautiful things. And then he heard footsteps behind him, and his daughter's voice calling out the way she always did in the mornings, bright and unworried, running toward him with her arms open. He understood in one terrible second what was about to happen, and he stepped back, and he held up his hands, and he said, "Do not touch me." She stopped. She looked at his face and saw something there she had never seen before. He was shaking. His hands, the hands that had reached for gold his whole life, were held out in front of him as if they belonged to someone else. He could not embrace her. He could not hold her hand. He could not touch the one thing he loved more than gold, because his touch would take the life out of her too. He went back into the garden and fell to his knees among the stiff golden roses and wept. And after a while the forest woman appeared again, and she looked at him without surprise. "I want it taken away," he said. "All of it." She told him to go to the river at dawn and wash his hands, and to carry the water back and sprinkle it over everything he had touched. He did this, and the gold fell away like a skin, and the wood returned, and the silk returned, and the roses softened and filled the garden again with scent and color. His daughter came running, and he picked her up and held her, and he did not care whether there was a single coin left in his treasury. He held her loosely, carefully, and for the first time in his life, the holding was enough. The king's mistake was not wanting gold. Everyone wants things. The mistake was that the wanting tightened until it swallowed everything else. It went from a preference to an insistence, and then from an insistence to an identity. He became a person whose hands could only do one thing, and the one thing they could do killed whatever they touched. Ajahn Chah's snake teaching points at the same pattern. We understand easily enough that gripping the painful end of things will cause trouble. a resentment held too long, a worry chewed on for weeks. These are the biting end of the snake, and most people can see them clearly. But Ajahn Chah said something people miss. Grasping the pleasant end is the same snake. A beautiful state of mind, a success, a moment when everything feels perfect. Close the hand around that and hold on tight, and it is only a matter of time before the head comes around. Because the tighter you grip a pleasant thing, the more afraid you become of losing it, and the fear is the bite. There is a particular word that signals the grip is at work, and the word is should. This should last. They should have said yes. The weather should be better. It should not be this hard. Every should is a hand closing, and the close cousin of should is expectation, the picture in the mind of how things ought to go, gripped so tightly that when things go differently, as they always do, the gap between the picture and reality becomes its own source of pain. A person going to dinner with a friend may have a picture of how the evening will go, and if the friend is tired or distracted or not quite the version of themselves the picture called for, disappointment arrives. The friend has not done anything wrong. The picture did it. The grip on what should happen crowded out what was actually happening, and the actual evening, which might have been fine, gets lost inside the gap. Ajahn Chah put it simply, make this non-grasping and mindfulness the guardian of your heart like a parent. Then your likes and dislikes will come calling like children. They will come to visit, and there is no problem if you can let them come and go without grasping. That image says everything. Likes and dislikes are children at the door. They show up, they want something, they make noise, and if the parent is settled and kind, they come and they go, and the house stays peaceful. The trouble begins only when the parent runs after one of them and holds on for dear life. In a mountain temple, long ago, a nun made a single vow for herself at the start of winter. It was a small vow, and she told no one about it. She simply decided that whenever the bell rang to mark the end of a sitting period, she would rise. She would not bargain. She would not wait for a better moment. She would hear the bell, and she would stand. At first it was easy. The sittings were ordinary, the mind restless, and when the bell rang, she was glad to move. But as the weeks passed and the cold deepened, the sittings began to change. One evening, something in her settled in a way it had not settled before. A stillness spread through her body. The breath became fine and slow. Thought thinned and then stopped. She sat in a kind of brightness she had never known, and every part of her was at rest. Then the bell rang. Everything in her said stay. The sitting was too good to leave. The foundation was too strong to waste. One more hour in this, just one more, and something might open even further. The pull was sweet, as if the stillness itself were calling her name. She felt the pull completely. She bowed to it, and she rose. She fumbled for her sandals in the cold hallway. Her feet stung on the stone floor, and the brightness broke apart, the way a reflection breaks when a hand enters the water. Within a few steps, it was gone. But something else was there. Something steadier, something that did not depend on whether the sitting had been good or bad, something that had nothing to do with brightness or dullness or any state of mind at all. The sitting had been a visitor, a beautiful one, and she had let it come and let it go. And the letting go was still here, and it was steadier and deeper than any visitor had ever been. This happened many times across the winter. Beautiful sittings came and ended. Dull sittings came and ended. The bell kept ringing, and she kept rising. Some nights, the pull to stay was almost overwhelming, a voice insisting that this was the one, the breakthrough, the sitting she could not afford to leave. And each time she felt the pull, honored it, and stood up anyway. She stopped measuring her sittings by what they felt like. She started noticing what remained after every feeling left. And what remained was always the same, an openness that did not depend on anything and that no bell could take away. The bliss was the tail of the snake. The openness was the freedom. And she could only find the freedom because she kept letting go of the bliss. That is the difference between wanting and clinging, felt from the inside. The nun wanted the stillness. She felt the pull of it completely, every cell of her saying stay. And she did not push the wanting away or pretend it was not there. She felt it. She bowed to it. Then she stood up. The wanting was just a visitor, like one of Ajahn Chah's children at the door, and she let it come and she let it go. Most of the wanting in a day is like this, small, passing, harmless. A taste of something good and then the thought, I want more. A plan that is going well and the thought, do not let this end. These are just children arriving at the door. If the door stays open, they come through, look around, and leave. The trouble starts when one of them is grabbed and held. The flavor is gone, but the mouth is still chasing it. The plan has changed, but the mind is still insisting it go back to the way it was. That insisting is the grip. The flavor was innocent. The grip is the suffering. Modern life is full of engineered wanting, things designed to make the grip tighten, advertisements, notifications, feeds that know exactly what to show next. None of them are dangerous in themselves. A picture of something nice, a suggestion to buy something, a show that keeps offering one more episode. They are all just children at the door. The only question is whether the door stays open or whether something in us grabs hold and will not let go. There is real freedom in discovering that a want can be felt fully and still not obeyed. Most people think freedom from desire means feeling no desire at all, going blank, going numb. The tradition teaches something different. The nun felt every ounce of the pull to stay. She was not numb. She was wide awake. She just did not hand herself over to it. And the moment it passed, what remained was bigger than anything the want could have delivered. If a small want comes up tonight or tomorrow, a craving, an urge, a pull towards something, there may be a moment when it can just be kept company, felt in the body, watched in the mind, neither pushed away nor followed. It will do what all visitors do. It will stay for a while, and then it will go. And what remains after it goes may be a surprise. There is no rush to move from here. Stay as long as you like, and the next part will be here when you are. Think of this morning's most urgent thought, the one that felt like it filled the whole room. Maybe it was a worry, maybe a plan, maybe a frustration that seemed like it would never leave. Now ask, where is it? Right now, at this moment, where did it go? It is nowhere. It passed through and left nothing behind. No trace, no scar, no residue. A few hours ago, it felt like the most important thing in the world, and now it cannot even be found. This is one of the strangest things about the mind. From the inside, a thought feels permanent. it feels like us. While we are thinking it, it is our entire world. But every thought has a beginning and an ending, and after the ending there is a small, open space where nothing is happening at all. That space is easy to miss, because the next thought usually arrives before we notice the gap. But the gap is there, and what lives in it is the same open awareness that has been the thread of this whole evening, the mind that does not cling. In a forest monastery, in the days when monks walked their meditation in narrow clearings among the trees, a young monk was doing his practice one afternoon. He walked 30 paces in one direction, turned, and walked 30 paces back. This is one of the oldest and simplest practices in Buddhism. There is nothing to achieve, nothing to solve. Just walking, and knowing that you are walking. But on this particular afternoon, the monk was not walking. He was worrying. His body moved back and forth along the path, but his mind was somewhere else entirely, tangled in a problem that had been following him for days. It was the kind of thought that grows louder the more attention it gets, a conversation replayed, a decision unmade, a knot that tightened every time he tried to untie it. He had been over the same ground in his head 100 times, and each pass made the knot feel more solid, more permanent, more like the center of his life. He reached the end of his 30 paces, and as he turned to walk back, something happened. He looked at the stretch of path he had just walked, the same dirt, the same leaves, the same light filtering through the branches, and he realized that the thought that had owned him there, just seconds ago, was gone. He looked at the spot where he had been standing, gripped by worry, and the worry was simply not there anymore. It had vanished without a sound, without a goodbye, without leaving any trace at all. He stood still, looking at the empty place on the path. A few seconds ago, that spot had been the most worried place in the world. Now it was just dirt and leaves and sunlight. The thought had felt like something solid and permanent. And here, just a few paces away, and a few seconds later, it was nothing at all. He walked the next length, and this time, halfway along, a plan grabbed him. He was deep inside it when he reached the far end and turned around. He looked back, and the plan was gone too. The place where it had lived was empty. He began to look back at every turning, and each time he found the same thing. The thought that had filled his whole world a moment earlier had disappeared completely. It had no weight, no bones, no roots. It had felt enormous from inside, and from a few paces away it was nothing at all. And then he started to notice something else. In the moment of turning, before the next thought arrived, there was a gap. A small, clear opening. It was quiet in a way that had nothing to do with sound. It was not the absence of something. It was the presence of something, something that had been there all along, hidden behind the constant stream of thoughts arriving one after another. The gap felt open and restful and strangely alive. Over the next hour, something loosened in him. He stopped being afraid of his thoughts. They kept coming, because that is what thoughts do, but the turning and looking had shown him something he could not unlearn. No thought was the whole show. Every single one had a before and an after, and the after was always the same. An open, clear, unbothered space, available every time, waiting for no one. Most of us live as if our thinking is who we are. This is one of the deepest habits a person can have, and it runs so constantly that we rarely question it. A person can spend an entire morning inside a single worry and come out of it believing she is a worried person. A man can spend a week replaying an argument and come out of it believing the argument is still happening. The thought feels so solid from inside that we take it for reality. We plan our lives around thoughts that will be gone by Tuesday. The identification is the trap, and it works like this. A thought of anger appears. If we believe it is us, we become an angry person, and we act accordingly. A thought of doubt appears. If we believe it is us, we become a doubtful person, and we build our plans around the doubt. The thought has all the power it needs, because nobody has questioned whether it is the whole picture. It showed up, and we handed it the keys. But the monk on his walking path discovered something that changes this completely. He saw that the thought was temporary. It came and it went, and it left nothing behind. That does not mean the anger or the doubt is fake. It just means it is passing. It is weather, and we are the sky. The weather is real. It is also not permanent, and it is also not who we are. This is what the Buddhist tradition means when it speaks of the conditioned and the unconditioned. Thoughts are conditioned. They are built from parts, something we saw, something we heard, a mood, a memory, a habit. And whatever is built from parts eventually comes apart. A house does not last forever. A cloud does not last forever. A thought does not even last 10 minutes most of the time. These are the conditioned things, and they make up most of what we call our lives. But there is something in us that is not built from parts at all. The awareness holding the thought was there before the thought arrived, and it is still there after the thought leaves. It was not constructed by any event, and so no event can take it apart. This is what the tradition calls the unconditioned, and it is the clearing in the forest that has been here all evening, always open, never damaged by what grows in it, never improved by what is removed from it. Just there. There is a useful image from one of the early Buddhist teachers. Thoughts are like billboards along a road. A person driving along sees them rise up, one after another. Each one calls out, "This way, this exit, come here." Some are bright, some are alarming, and if the driver takes every exit, the drive never ends. But a person who sees the billboard, notes what it is advertising, and keeps driving, arrives. The billboard has no power over anyone who recognizes it as a billboard, and a thought has no power over anyone who sees it as a thought. There is also a physical side to this that can be helpful in an ordinary moment. Thoughts do not live only in the head. A worrying thought tightens the belly. An angry thought heats the face. An anxious thought buzzes behind the ribs. When the attention drops from the story in the head to the sensation in the body, something useful happens. The body knows how to process what the head can only spin in circles. The energy of the feeling gets to move, crest, and pass, like weather actually passing instead of being argued about. Many people find that a thought they have been wrestling with for hours dissolves in a minute or two once the attention moves to where the body is holding it. Long ago, in a cave hermitage during the deepest cold of winter, a young man came to a master called Bodhidharma. The master had been sitting in his cave facing the wall for a long time. He did not welcome visitors, and he did not offer comfort. But the young man was determined. He waited outside in the snow. Hours passed, and then days. The cold pressed through his robes. His feet went numb. Snow gathered on his shoulders and melted and gathered again. The master did not turn around. Other travelers on the mountain saw the young man standing there and asked him what he was waiting for. and he could not fully explain. He only knew that the churning in his mind had become so relentless that he would stand in any weather for a chance to have it resolved. After many days of this, Bodhidharma finally spoke to him, still facing the wall. "What do you want?" he asked. "My mind will not rest," the young man said. "It churns and spins and will not settle. Every thought leads to another, and every worry breeds a new one. I have tried everything I know. I have studied. I have sat. I have recited. Nothing touches it. Please, Master, pacify my mind." Bodhidharma did not move. "Bring me your mind," he said, "and I will pacify it for you." The instruction was strange. Bring you my mind? But the young man took it seriously. He searched. He looked for the mind that was churning. He looked for the worry, the spinning, the restlessness. He tried to locate it the way a person reaches for a buzzing insect in a dark room, following the sound, expecting at any moment to close a hand around it. He could not find it. The more he searched, the less there was to find. The churning mind, the one that had driven him through the snow and kept him standing for days, could not be located anywhere. It had felt enormous. It had felt like all of him. And when he looked directly at it, there was nothing there. Just thought after thought, each one arising and vanishing, and underneath them all, a wide, still space that had been there the whole time, untouched by any of it. "I have searched for my mind," the young man said, "and I cannot find it." Bodhidharma said, "Then I have already pacified it." In that moment, the young man understood. He had believed his churning mind was a solid thing, a permanent feature of who he was. He had traveled across the country to have someone fix it. But when he looked at it clearly, it was not a thing at all. It was a stream of passing events, one thought replacing another, each one arising and vanishing before the next arrived. There was no solid block of anxiety in there. There was just the movement, and underneath the movement, the same open space that the walking monk found between his turning points. The clearing in the forest. The mind that was never truly disturbed because it was never truly a thing that could be disturbed. There is a deep comfort in this. The spinning mind, the one that keeps us awake, the one that replays and rehearses and worries, feels so real. It can feel like the most powerful thing in us, but it cannot survive being looked at directly. A thought examined is a thought already dissolving. A worry investigated is a worry losing its grip. Not because we talk ourselves out of it, and not because we replace it with a better thought. Just because we look at it clearly and it turns out to have no bones. It is made of the same passing material as a cloud, and like a cloud, it moves on. The young man at Bodhidharma's cave did not become a person without thoughts. He went on thinking for the rest of his life, but he stopped believing that his thoughts were the whole of him, and that one change was enough. Thoughts became visitors in a house that was much larger than any of them. They came and went, and the house was fine. Our lives are full of thoughts, and most of them are fine, and some of them are useful, and a few of them are beautiful. The only trouble comes when we forget that we are the clearing and start believing we are the trees. The clearing does not mind what grows in it. It does not fight the trees or prefer one kind over another. It just goes on being open. And that openness, that space between one thought and the next, is available right now, between any two breaths, in any room. Between now and morning, A thought may come and go, and there may be a moment right after it leaves, just a breath or two, where the space is visible. The gap before the next thought fills in. If that gap shows up, nothing needs to be done with it. It is already complete, already at rest, already the mind that does not cling, doing what it has always done, being open. Let this stretch of the evening come to a rest here. Whenever you feel like moving on, we will go together. There is a worry that follows this teaching around like a shadow, and tonight we face it directly. If the mind lets go of everything, will it also let go of love? Will it stop caring? Will a person who clings to nothing become a person who feels nothing? The Buddhist answer is no, and the answer is so firm that it is almost the opposite. The tradition says that non-clinging is what finally lets the heart work properly. When there is less agenda between us and the world, caring flows more freely. A hand that is gripping cannot reach for anyone. A hand that is open can. In a mountain retreat, deep in winter, a nun had been sitting for many weeks. Her practice had grown spacious, and the mind had opened out like a valley after a narrow pass. There was room in her, room she had not felt before. But with the room came something she had not expected. Every time the mind grew wide and still, sadness rose. It came up slowly, like water in a well, steady and unhurried, and it had no story attached to it. It was just sadness, filling the openness like smoke in a room. At first, she tried to sit with it, as she sat with everything else, watching it, letting it be. But it kept returning, and after many days, she began to wonder whether something was wrong with her practice. She spoke to the elder who was guiding the retreat, and the elder said only, "Do not close. Turn toward it and ask it what it wants." The next morning, when the sadness rose again, she did not push it away, and she did not sit beside it at a distance. She turned toward it, as one turns toward a person who has been standing at the edge of a room for a long time, waiting to be noticed. The sadness shifted. It was not formless after all. It carried a feeling, and the feeling, when she let it come close enough to hear, said something very plain. This moment is not enough. This sitting is not enough. This life is not enough. There is always something missing, something more that should be here. She heard it. She let it say what it needed to say. She did not argue with it or try to fix it. And as she sat with it, something strange happened. The sadness softened. The tightness in it loosened. And what replaced it was a tenderness so clear it almost hurt. She looked at the light on the wall, and it was enough. She heard the rain on the roof, and it was enough. The steam rising from the rice pot was enough. Everything she had been looking past for weeks, thinking there should be something more, was suddenly and completely enough. For the rest of that day, she moved through the retreat with new eyes. The same rooms, the same food, the same cold hallway. But everything looked like a gift, because the voice that had been whispering not enough had been heard, and in being heard, it had let go. The sadness in that story was not a problem. It was a lid, and the spaciousness of her practice had lifted it. Underneath the lid was a belief she had been carrying for a long time, maybe her whole life, that the present moment, as it is never quite enough. Most people carry some version of this. It runs so constantly that we stop hearing it. And because we never hear it, we never get to answer it. We just keep reaching for the next thing, the next improvement, the next better version of now. When the nun finally heard what the sadness was saying and let it be said without resisting, the belief dissolved on its own. She did not replace it with a better belief. She just felt it fully, and it loosened, as so many things in this evening's journey have loosened once they were allowed. The poet T.S. Eliot wrote a line that lives at the center of this teaching. Teach me to care and not to care. It sounds like a contradiction, but it is not. Caring without clinging is what happens when the grip releases and the heart stays open. A mother caring for her child, fully present, fully feeling, without the panic tightness that says this must never change. A friend sitting with someone in difficulty, fully there, fully feeling the weight of it, without the desperate need to fix it or make it stop. That is caring without clinging. The caring gets deeper because nothing in the heart is braced against the moment. The forms of love that carry no clinging are the ones people remember most. A parent who loves a child without trying to own the child's life. A friend who can sit with someone's sadness and not rush to cover it over with cheerfulness. A partner who delights in the other person without needing them to stay exactly the same forever. In each case, the love wants nothing for itself. It is turned entirely outward, toward the welfare of the other person, and because it is not trying to get anything back, it can give freely. Love like this does not wear out. It does not curdle into resentment when it goes unthanked. It simply keeps flowing, because nothing in it is dammed up by an agenda. In the ancient city of Vaishali, there lived a man named Vimalakirti. He was not a monk. He was a layman, a householder, someone who lived in the middle of ordinary life, with a family and a home and all the daily concerns that come with them. But he was also, by every account, the freest person in the city. Monks and scholars came from far away to sit with him because in his presence something shifted. The knots they had been working on for years seemed to loosen by themselves. One season, Vimalakirti fell ill. He lay in his room, on a simple bed, and he did not get better. The Buddha, hearing of this, asked his monks to go and visit. One by one, the most accomplished among them were asked, and one by one, they declined. The first to be asked was Shariputra, one of the Buddha's most respected monks. He shook his head. He remembered a time Vimalakirti had found him sitting in the forest, deep in meditation, and had gently taken apart every assumption Shariputra held about what meditation was for. The conversation had left Shariputra speechless, and he had never quite recovered. "I am not equal to that visit," he said. Another monk was asked. He too remembered being lovingly and thoroughly out-argued. "He saw through everything I thought I knew," the monk said, "and he did it with such kindness that I could not even be upset." One after another, the Buddha's finest students found a reason not to go, and in every case, the reason was the same. They had been in a room with Vimalakirti before, and the experience of being seen that clearly, of having every comfortable hiding place removed, had been more than they were ready to repeat. At last, Manjushri, the wisest of the Buddha's followers, agreed to go. A large crowd followed, because everyone knew that when these two minds met, something would be said that was worth the walk. The room was almost empty. Vimalakirti lay on his bed, thin and tired, and Manjushri sat beside him. The crowd pressed in at the door. "You are ill," Manjushri said. "How did this illness arise?" Vimalakirti's answer was simple. "My illness arises from compassion," he said, "because the world is full of beings who are struggling, and as long as they struggle, something in me aches. When they are free of their struggle, my illness will end." This was not a holy performance. He meant it plainly. He felt the world's difficulty in his own body, as a parent feels a child's fever, because nothing in him was walled off from it. He had no barrier between himself and the people around him, no filter, no defense. And because there was no barrier, their pain reached him fully. That was his illness. But he was not trapped by it. He was not drowning. He felt everything, and he was not swept away by any of it. He lay on his bed, thin and tired, and the room around him was one of the most peaceful places in the whole city. People came to him in their confusion, and they left clearer. He cared without clinging, and his caring helped people in a way that anxious, gripping care never could. Vimalakirti's illness is a picture of what the open heart actually looks like in a life. It does not protect itself. It does not build a wall and call it peace. It feels what is there to be felt, fully, and it is not wrecked by the feeling, because it is not holding on to it. The feeling comes, and it is real, and it passes, and the heart is still open for the next one. This is the opposite of what most people fear about non-clinging. The fear is that letting go means going numb, becoming some kind of stone figure that smiles while the world falls apart. But the tradition is saying the reverse. The people who feel the most, who care the most deeply, who respond the most wisely, are the ones whose hands are open. Their hearts have room because they are not filled with gripping. A hand that is gripping cannot comfort anyone. It is too busy holding on. A hand that is open can reach towards someone, can rest on a shoulder, can hold a cup of tea and offer it. The open hand does more in the world. Caring increases when clinging decreases, because the energy that was going into the grip is now free for something better. This reaches into the smallest, most ordinary relationships. A conversation where nothing is being defended is a conversation where people can actually hear each other. A family meal where nobody is performing is a meal where everyone can be themselves. A friendship where feelings are allowed to come and go, where sadness does not need to be fixed and joy does not need to be held onto, is a friendship that can hold anything. There is a kind of love that carries no clinging at all, and most people have experienced it at least once, even if they did not have a name for it. A parent watching a grown child walk into a life of their own, feeling the ache of it and the pride of it at the same time, and not pulling the child back. A friend who sits with someone in real difficulty and does not try to talk them out of what they are feeling, just stays, just listens, just is there. An old couple who have long since stopped needing each other to be anything other than exactly who they are. In each case, the love wants nothing for itself. It is turned entirely toward the other person, and because it is not trying to get anything back, it gives without thinning out. Love like this does not wear out. It does not curdle into resentment when it goes unthanked. It simply keeps flowing, because nothing in it is dammed up by an agenda. Making the mind of freedom a priority in a life does not require renouncing anything. Nothing outward needs to change. The same meals get cooked. The same people are loved. The same work gets done. But the orientation is different. Instead of building life around the next thing to acquire or protect, the life is built around the open hand. And people around such a person can feel the difference, even if they could never put it into words. They feel safer. They feel more seen. They relax. because the person in front of them is not trying to get anything from the moment, and that frees everyone in the room to simply be. The Buddha's path was never about going somewhere else or becoming someone different. It was about seeing clearly what is already here and letting go of everything that blocks the seeing. A life oriented this way does not look unusual from the outside. The dishes still get washed. The bills still get paid. The school run still happens. But underneath all of it there is a current of openness, like a river running beneath a city, feeding everything without being seen. And the people who live close to that current, the ones who have made the letting go their steady practice, tend to be the warmest people in any room, because their hands are free. Somewhere in the coming days, a feeling may arrive, something warm or something difficult. If it does, there may be a moment to simply welcome it in and let it be there, without managing it, without holding on, and without pushing away. Like a guest who sits down, says what they came to say, and then gets up and leaves. The welcoming is the practice. The letting go happens by itself. Let the evening rest here for a little while. There is one more stretch of the path ahead, and it is close. What is a sound? Before we name it, before we decide whether we like it or not, before we connect it to a memory or a judgment or a wish, there is a moment, very brief, when a sound is just a sound. Then the mind adds a layer. That is a bird. That is traffic. That is someone I know. Each layer pulls us further from the sound itself and deeper into our commentary about it. The Buddha gave one of his shortest and most complete teachings on exactly this, and it was given to a man who asked for the whole path in a handful of words. In the time of the Buddha, there lived a man named Bahiya. He was respected in his community, well known for his practice, and by most appearances he had gone a long way along the spiritual path. People came to him for guidance. His reputation was solid. But deep down, in a place he rarely visited, Bahiya suspected that his attainment was not what it appeared to be. He had ideas about freedom, many of them. He could explain the teachings clearly. But the freedom itself, the living thing behind the ideas, he was not sure he had touched it. For a long time he kept this doubt to himself. Then one day, an inner voice, clear and honest, in a way his ordinary thinking was not, told him plainly, "You have not arrived. You are not free. But there is a teacher who can show you the way. Go and find the Buddha." Bahiya left everything behind. He did not pack carefully or make arrangements. He set out on foot, carrying almost nothing, and he walked for a long time. The road was dusty and hot in some stretches and wet in others, and the miles went slowly. He slept where he could and ate what was offered. Along the way, he passed through villages where people were busy with their lives, selling at markets, tending fields, raising children, and he watched them and wondered whether the freedom he was walking toward had anything to do with their ordinary days, or whether it was something apart from all of it. He did not know. That was the honest truth of his walk. He had spent years teaching others about the path, and now, alone on a road with nothing in his hands, he was not sure what he actually knew. The doubt was uncomfortable, but it was also clean. It had burned away his pretending, and what was left was just a man walking, with one sincere question, towards someone who might be able to answer it. He arrived at the town of Savatthi where the Buddha was staying. He found the Buddha on his morning walk through the town, going from house to house with his bowl, collecting food. "Please teach me," Bahia said. "Please give me the teaching." The Buddha said, "This is not the time. Come back when the alms round is finished." Bahia waited, and then he asked again. The Buddha gave the same answer. Bahia asked a third time, and this time there was something in his voice that the Buddha heard, a sincerity so complete that it could not wait any longer. The Buddha stopped walking. He stood in the dusty street with his bowl in his hands, and he said this, "Then, Bahia, you should train yourself like this. In the seen, let there be just the seen. In the heard, just the heard. In the sensed, just the sensed. In the known, just the known. When for you there is just the seen in the seen, just the heard in the heard, just the sensed in the sensed, just the known in the known, then you will not be caught up in it. And when you are not caught up in it, you will not be located in it. And when you are not located in it, then there is no here, no there, no in between. And that itself is the end of suffering." Bahia heard these words, standing in the street, and he understood. The understanding was immediate and complete. He had walked all those miles looking for something grand, some experience that would prove he was free. And the Buddha had pointed at the simplest thing in the world, the sound as just a sound, the sight as just a sight, the feeling as just a feeling. Nothing added, nothing taken away, just what is here, received as it is, without the layer of commentary and self-reference that turns every moment into a project. He stood in the dusty road, and the dust was just dust, and the light was just light, and for the first time in his life, nothing was missing. Everything this evening has been circling the same center, and this is it, said as simply as it can be said. In the scene, just the scene. What does that actually mean for an ordinary day? It means that most of our trouble comes from what we add to experience, not from the experience itself. A raindrop falls on the sleeve. That is the scene. Then the mind adds, "I forgot my coat. The day is ruined. I should have checked the weather." Each layer pulls us further from the drop of rain and deeper into an argument with reality. The drop itself was just a drop. The layers turned it into a story, and the story is where the suffering lives. The same thing happens with a compliment. Someone says something kind. That is the heard. Then the mind adds, what did she really mean? Was she sincere? Do other people think that too? I wish more people noticed. The kind words disappear under the pile of commentary, and what could have been received as a gift becomes another thing to manage. It happens with the body too. A shoulder aches. That is the sensed. Just a sensation, just a signal. But the mind adds, something must be wrong. This is getting worse. This is what aging feels like. How long will this go on? By the time the commentary is done, one sore shoulder has become a whole life story, and most of the discomfort is in the story rather than the shoulder. The Buddha's instruction strips all of that away. Let the rain be rain. Let the words be words. Let the ache be an ache. When the layers stop, even briefly, what is left is life itself, vivid and close and strangely sufficient. Most people are surprised by how much relief there is in just letting things be what they are. And this is not passivity. A person who lets the rain be rain still comes in out of the storm. A person who lets a pain be a pain still goes to see the doctor. A person who hears a cry for help still helps. All of life's ordinary responses continue, and they continue well, often better than before, because they are coming from clarity instead of from a tangle of stories and fears. When a person meets a problem without the commentary, the problem is just a problem, and the hands are free to deal with it. When a person meets the same problem through a fog of stories about what it means and who is to blame and how terrible it is, the problem has doubled and the hands are full. Buddha himself was a practical man. He had walked a long road, managed a community, made real decisions. The Buddha did not tell him to stop doing any of that. He told him to stop adding layers to what he was doing. The doing goes on. The arguing, the judging, the constant running narrative about what everything says about us, that is what falls away. And most of the time we do not even know it is running. When it pauses, even for a breath, there is a quality of ease that people sometimes describe as feeling like they just set down a bag they forgot they were carrying. In a training temple, in the hours before dawn, the monks would rise in the dark and make their way to the meditation hall. The temple bell rang 108 times each morning, struck by whichever monk had been assigned the duty that week. Most mornings the bell sounded the same, steady, reliable, unremarkable. It did its job, and no one gave it a second thought. But one morning the master of the temple, an old man named Aikido, was sitting in his room when the bell began, and he straightened. Something was different. Each note had a fullness to it that the same bell, struck by the same striker, did not usually carry. The sound filled the courtyard and the hall and the cold morning air in a way that seemed to slow everything down. By the fourth or fifth strike, the master had set down his tea and was listening with his whole body. He sat through all 108 strikes, and by the end he was very still. Something had come through those notes that most mornings did not. It was not a matter of volume or technique. It was something harder to name, a quality of complete presence, as if whoever was ringing the bell had nothing else in the world to do and nowhere else in the world to be. When the morning duties began, Aikido called for the novice who had rung the bell. A young monk arrived, nervous, certain he had done something wrong. "You rang the bell this morning," Aikido said. It was not a question. "Yes, master." "Tell me how." The young monk hesitated. He looked at the floor, then at the old man's face, and saw that there was no scolding in it. "My teacher, before I came here, taught me to treat the bell as the Buddha himself," he said. "So before each strike, I bow. And when I strike, I put everything I have into the sound. And after each strike, I listen to the note until it has faded all the way to silence before I raise the striker again. I try to be fully with each note, from beginning to end, and nothing else." "How long have you been doing this?" Aikido asked. "Since the beginning. It is the only way I was taught." Aikido looked at him for a long time. Then he said, "When you rang this morning, there was no one between you and the bell. Do you understand what that means?" The novice shook his head. "It means that everything the tradition teaches about presence, about letting go of the self, about meeting the moment as it is, you just showed the entire temple what that sounds like. 108 times in a row, with nothing added." The novice bowed, still not entirely sure what had happened. But the master was sure. He had heard hundreds of monks ring that same bell over many years, and most of them had rung it while thinking about something else. The day ahead, the cold, the task after the task. This morning, one young man had rung it with nothing in his mind except the bell, and the difference had been unmistakable. That is what the Buddha's teaching to Buddha sounds like when it enters an ordinary act. One bell, one bow, one sound, one silence. No commentary, no performance, no self-consciousness. The bell did not become a better bell. The novice did not have a special technique. What changed was what was missing. There was no running story between the young man and the sound. No assessment of how the striking was going. No worry about what the master would think. No plan for the rest of the morning. Just the bow, the sound, and the listening until the note was gone. Most of what the mind adds to experience runs so constantly that we think it is part of the experience. We think the judgment is part of the sunset. We think the comparison is part of the meal. We think the self-consciousness is part of the conversation. The teaching says it is not. The sunset is the sunset. The meal is the meal. The conversation is the conversation. And when the additions fall away, even briefly, what is left is fuller, more alive, and more satisfying than the version we had been constructing. This is where the evening's whole journey comes together. The open hands of the first story. The sufficiency that was already here before the silver arrived. The space in the room that was always there behind the furniture. The water the fish swam in. The pain that could be separated from the fighting. The falling that was just falling without the verdict. The wanting that could be felt and not obeyed. The thoughts that came and went, leaving the clearing undisturbed. The heart that cared more deeply because it was not gripping. All of it was this. In the scene, just the scene. In the herd, just the herd. Let things be what they are, and discover that what they are is enough. Tonight, lying here, sounds may come and go. The hum of something in the walls. A breath. The settling of a house. If a sound arrives, there may be a moment to let it be only what it is. A sound and the space around it, and the ease of a mind that has finally opened its hands. No name needed. No opinion needed. Just what is here, received whole. Let this be the resting place. There is nowhere else to go, and the going is done. The mind that does not cling has been here through every moment of this evening. It was here in the first story, when the old woman asked the scholar a question he could not answer, and the candle went out. It was here in the forest, when the prince stopped collecting sounds, and the unheard arrived. It was here while the sandal maker sang, and while the herdsman's wife told the truth about 50 years of searching. It was here in the fish's river, and in the old monk's window, and in the desert where the stream stopped thrashing and let the wind carry her over. It was here when the grandmother's hand was held at the table. It was here when the hermit said, "Get up again," and when Yan Hui sat and forgot. It was here in the golden garden, and in the bell tower before dawn, and in the dusty street where the Buddha said, "In the scene, just the scene." It has been here because it is always here. It is not something to carry away from tonight because it cannot be carried. It is not something to hold on to because it cannot be held. It is the holding's end, the hands opening, the heart resting in its own company. Nothing needs to be remembered. Nothing needs to be done. The mind of freedom has already found you, the same way water finds a fish, without announcement, without effort, without a single thing that needs to change. Sleep well, and thank you for joining us here at Midnight Monk.